Good morning. It's Wednesday or Thursday, April 9th. This is the House Transportation Committee, and we're continuing our conversation on S 326, the miscellaneous DMV bill. We had our Legislative Council go through pretty much all the sections contained in this bill, and now we're going to be turning over to testimony from DMV. And first up is we have the Captain Matt Nesta from the Commercial Vehicle Enforcement Department. Do you want to join us? Yes, sir. Just hold in. All right. Good thing we started. So yeah, just say your name for the record, and you heard to testify in section 18 of the bill, and take it away.
Morning. Thank you. Morning. My name is Matthew Nesto, and I am employed with the Department of Motor Vehicles. I'm the Chief of Safety, DMV. So I'm here today to answer some questions or to run through the proposed passed legislation from the Senate, specifically related to Section 4107, commercial driver's license. The intent of this provision was to solidify practices which could be put in place in an emergency circumstance when the need arises for imminent life-saving strategies by the state or municipal governments. Are currently, drivers of state vehicles that are in excess of 26,001 pounds require CDLs. This is the same for governmental vehicles in operation by our municipalities. What this legislation proposes to do is to, in very rare circumstances, when declared as an emergency under the governor's declaration or their designee, to exempt certain state employees or municipal employees based on the decree to allow for those life-saving or imminent danger recovery operations. We've crafted this in a few different ways. We chatted about how, the legality of it is. This would notably apply only to intra-state, in-state operations. It wouldn't extend outside of the state. And then once this resolution was passed by, the governor or the designee for the emergency, it would be filed with the FMCSA. So they're at least aware of it. And I'm here to answer any questions from the committee on what may be brewing on concerns with it.
Representative Couch.
Yeah, thanks for coming. Now, we had some discussion about this, and there's a federal allowance for sort of the same thing, and is this parallels that?
The federal allowance is it's very aligned with snow removal and specifically for the municipalities. That at least that carve out of getting the CDLs not being required for certain snow emergencies exist only for municipal governments and only for municipal governments under 3,000 population. So it wouldn't necessarily apply to this larger need potentially. I think of, the snowmageddons that have recently our, partner states have had in, southern Massachusetts or Rhode Island, or flooding, imminent flooding that we've had in the states, where someone, works for an entity or works for a governmental, alongside other folks who do this work, might need to operate, a heavy piece of machinery into some sort of a flooded area to rescue people.
And I'll just continue. So we've had a couple of emergency flooding events. Is this something that would be allowed, let's say, in the first 2 or 3 days versus 2 weeks into it? I mean, assuming there's no imminent life safety issue, and it now is just, nobody needs to be rescued, but now it's down to getting the roads up and running. When does this take place and then say, oh, we're not doing it anymore?
Right. I think, it's a slippery slope of when that time happens, right? And, it would be have to be very clearly defined, based on it says explicit permitted to do so in terms of the governor's declaration. So in that declaration, I think it's very clear what the terms of that are. And, we would obviously provide input, on what we think would be a reasonable amount of time. I think the purpose of this is imminent life-saving, imminent, threats to people's health and risk. When you start moving into like recovery, I think that would have to cease, and that should be in declaration itself.
Maybe one more follow-up. And would you expect this to be state employees, or it could be a company?
Yeah, so this would be very narrowly banded to employees that work for the state government. I can think of like V-Trans employees maybe being, an optimal type of employee that would, they're operating heavy machinery or type machinery like this. I mean, the difference between a 26,000 pound dump truck that we might have and a 26,001 pound dump truck that we might have are very similar. And so they work with much of their peers. So V-Trans employees might be, an optimal type asset to use. There may be other employees in other departments and organizations and agencies within the state that operate heavier vehicles that have training in that. And then in the municipality side, same, they have to be municipal government workers that are employed by the town or the municipality.
And then, is there any opportunity to get in trouble with the federal rules on CDLs? I mean, because, the driving under the influence would keep you from getting a CDL. So if we did, have an emergency situation, provide it to somebody who wouldn't qualify for a CDL, would that get us into any issue with the federal government? And do you like fill out a form and say, this person is now approved?
The process doesn't lay out anything like that in the proposed law. I think it would have to be pursuant to what's written in the declaration at the time for what those parameters are. To answer your question, as far as running afoul of federal guidelines, I feel like obviously there is a federal requirement for much of this stuff. We explicitly reference 383.3, which recognizes that governments have the ability to exempt certain operations from full life-saving and imminent human risk. And that's clear in that these duties are explicitly for that operation. I think that wouldn't run afoul with the terms of the federal regulations for that limited scope of what it was designed for.
And are there people who have, so is there a list, or at any one time, would somebody be able to say, I've been approved, even though I don't have a CDL, I can work for the next couple of days running this dump truck? How do we know who's been exempted?
I think, again, it would be, the state, would have to say, like, I need this employee to do this, or these 4 employees to do this. And for a very limited, narrow span of time or scope of what they're asked to do that and then be done.
And who approves that?
It would have to be, I believe, probably someone in that transportation mechanism, like just district transportation manager, people that supervise those employees at V-Trans or their individual agency.
Thank you.
Representative Burke?
Yeah, I remember during Irene, in the community adjacent to Brattleboro and Guilford, there was somebody, just a resident, who went out with his machinery and started working on the road. I can't imagine that person would ever get cited if they didn't have a CDL and didn't have the explicit permission of the town or the state.
There's some level of real reasonable common sense that does go into the enforcement of these regulations. And I would concur that, although, you don't turn a blind eye, that there are certain, I can't imagine anyone waiting there to give that guy a ticket for doing that. Yes.
Saw a need and went to work.
Representative Kuzi?
Thanks for all this. So I appreciate the fact that you'd use your best judgment to put somebody in a vehicle. As you know, CDLs have multiple levels of certifications, from air brakes to hazmat to these type of things. And this particular piece of legislation doesn't address the likelihood doesn't address those likelihoods. And I absolutely appreciate that you're thinking about what you're doing. But isn't there an issue about hazmat and putting somebody in a dump truck or or something that has, very specific issues? And how do you address those?
Yeah, so I do concur with you, sir, that there's nothing specifically in the statute that references some of those more odd or more, rare things, hazardous materials being one of them. There's not very many, being a state employee for 22 years myself, working within the Agency of Transportation, there's very few, if any, V-Trans trucks that carry hazardous materials. So I don't know as if we would run into that at the state level. They're not carrying, explosives or, hydrochloric acid or, other, dynamite sticks. So, I mean, the potential to run afoul with some of those more, dicey topics such as transporting passengers for hire, the state is just, and even the municipalities, I don't believe have vehicles that are assigned or equipped that would run into that issue.
Because we know that a truck over 26,000 GVW has air brakes, and that's a requirement for CDL to understand that you passed your air brake test.
Correct.
So I understand your professionalism and your thoughtfulness about doing this. This just doesn't address it. What it just says is you're able to do it. And I trust you. But I'm not sure other people might have some other thoughts.
To that point on the air brakes, I think you do bring up a valid concern. I will allude to the fact that there are several other types of classes of categories of vehicles that are equipped with air brakes that we don't currently license with CDLs, fire trucks being some larger box trucks that are equipped with air brakes, even on the commercial side, that aren't quite over that 26,001 threshold. So I do agree with you that, the endorsement portion of a CDL, with air brakes is certainly a different knowledge set. We do have some vehicles out there are operated without CDLs now that have air brakes.
Thank you.
Chair. Oh, Secretary Flynn, happy to have you here this morning.
Thank you, Joe Falls, Secretary of Agency. The captain started the thought that I was thinking, sitting here to Representative Township point a moment ago, which if I don't correctly, how do we know who's doing this and, sort of keeps track of who's doing this and how long? And what I wanted to offer is that every fire department, every one of your cities, if you live in a city or your town, currently is basically operating under what the captain is testifying to. As a former volunteer fire chief, every member, including myself, of the fire, I happen to have a CDL, but every member of the fire department had the authority to operate a fire truck. We had fire trucks in excess of 26,100 pounds. We had fire trucks that carried 6 people. So I'm not sure what the threshold is, for passengers. I don't know that on CDL, but clearly hundreds of gallons of fuel. You have a tanker endorsement in a CDL suite for commercial operators, but yet you can operate a 4,000 gallon tanker, and that's 32,000 pounds of water alone. And you can do that as a person that just has a valid Vermont driver's license. And every single fire department can authorize any new member to do that, assuming, of course, the fire department's got standards on emergency vehicle operations. And you're supposed to put a new member through that, but it's not state certified. It's not blessed by the DMV or the federal government. So the point in all this is the feds do create these caveats for what's generally a universal understood public safety need. And I think the captain's doing a good job just testifying to the fact that this is intended for, we've got half of our crew is out sick and I'm from the town of South Shore. I've only got 4 employees to start with. Need to get a few people, you know. Jimmy Robinson on the farm doesn't have a CDL, but he knows how to run this truck. We're gonna call Jimmy up and get him to go out and plow. I think that's the intention here, but I don't want to speak for anything. I just wanted to address the fire department part because that's real.
Yeah.
And
Oh, I understand that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm aware of that.
it's currently happening.
And so to just follow up, so to go out and plow, there would be a declaration of an emergency.
Correct.
And then, hey, we gotta
Correct.
clear these
That's right.
roads and get people safe.
It's
Okay.
all triggered by a declaration from the governor, not the select board chair who just thinks this town, our town is gonna be in a bad way, so let's get extra people
Yeah,
tomorrow. It's gotta cascade down from whoever the governor is. And generally, if there's gonna be an emergency, I would assume under any emergency order, it's probably going to take into account other things than just, gosh, we gotta plow some snow. There's
Yeah.
probably some
Yeah.
other bad things already happened.
Right.
That's
Okay, thank you.
Not sure exactly where we're at. No more questions on this particular piece, huh? Or are there? I don't know. We already had it.
I do think, though, that we should certainly make sure that it's limited to the scope of governmental employees that work for an entity, so that there's some fail-safe there to ensure. Control.
Representative White? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, I mean, I think right now it is saying an employee of state agency or a Vermont municipality. So are you feeling uncomfortable about the Vermont municipality part of that?
Well, I think that's fine, as long as a Vermont, city, town, village, yeah, incorporated.
Representative White?
You have kind of a list in mind in emergency situations that you could call upon in communities?
I don't know if, I don't believe that anyone's got currently a list, but I think, if you were to poll, certainly like if you, if the Secretary of Transportation were to poll, his direct reports and say, is there a list of folks that we know are capable of doing this? And, right now, we don't do this because, it's not really permitted, statutorily. But I'm sure that every district transportation administrator in the state has a list of folks that they could probably familiarize very quickly, even today, so that when the need arose, that they were able to safely do that.
Well, Captain, I guess thank you very much. I don't, Director, you have anything you want to add at all?
I can't add anything.
Being supported.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
There's some changes and adjustments. Guess we're not having our next witness until 10 o'clock.
No, I guess my other question is sort of like maybe just about liability. If there was an unfortunate incident, or it was an accident, like how would that play out? Maybe that's more of a question for Amy. Or we're exempting employees from CDLs, how would that work if they're plowing and they, hit somebody or killed somebody? Would they be left off the hook because, they're exempt or, I guess that'd be a question for Amy.
Would they be covered under the municipalities or states liability?
Yeah, liability, yeah, how that would all work, yeah.
Think if I was hanging off the side of the cliff, by dangling by my underwear or something, I might be real happy if somebody.
You might.
That happens so often.
Come over and give me a hand. Strictly a hypothetical situation.
I know, I was wondering if it happened,
No,
because
it's,
it came right to mind.
That was when you don't adjourn when you should have. I haven't had a chance to look at it, but there is updates to the agenda, so checking today and tomorrow, there's gonna be some other updates, and we are hoping that this afternoon we'll have a testimony and then finish the last 3 pages with Damien. I believe that's for this afternoon, so don't be surprised the agenda has a little bit of updates, and we'll go from there. Right now, you are break for the next 20 minutes. Be back for start at 10 o'clock.